What's up, everybody? Welcome to the BeMe podcast brought to you by BeMe Studios for BeMe Health, where we dive into the stories that shape us and the champions who inspire us. I'm your host, psychiatrist Dr. Taiwo Alonge, and today we're thrilled to spotlight a remarkable figure in athletics and competitive swimming, Stanzi McGowan. Stanzi McGowan's journey from the U.S. junior national team to becoming a four-time junior national champion and an international medalist underscores her exceptional swimming talent. At the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, her athletic excellence was highlighted by her prowess in sprint freestyle events and critical contribution to the historic win of the 2020 SEC championship team. Her standout performance at the Olympic trials and her nomination for the 2020 NCAA Woman of the Year award further attest to her remarkable achievements in and out of the pool. After a decorated collegiate career as a swimmer, she joined the CSU Bakersfield Athletics Department in 2022 as the athletic compliance specialist. Stanzi brings a wealth of experience and a unique perspective to her role, honed through years of dedication in and out of the water. Stanzi also serves as an important role in promoting student athletic well-being through her involvement in the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, the Athletic Mental Health Committee, and her efforts in the Division I transition process, all of which showcases her dedication to supporting athletes across all facets of their lives. Now at the helm of the Elevate Athletics Consulting, Stanzi leverages her extensive experience to guide young athletes through the complex world of collegiate sports recruitment. Her tailored approach to eligibility advisement, personal recruitment coaching, and parental guidance sessions ensures that every athlete's unique traits are recognized and nurtured. Join us as we dive into Stanzi McGowan's inspiring story, exploring the depths of her impact on sports and uncovering her passion to elevate the next generation of athletes. Stanzi, that was a mouthful. Again, I'm a Florida Gator. You're a Tennessee volunteer, so there's some beef there, but I want to make sure I got everything right and didn't do you any injustice. So please, is there anything we need to add to that?
No, I'm super excited to be here. That was a great introduction, and really excited to be a part of this conversation and an even bigger conversation about student athlete mental health, well-being, and how we can upgrade and elevate student athlete recruitment for our young people.
Awesome. So on our podcast, we usually like to start out by asking our guests what they were like as a teen. So what circle you ran around with, what activities you were involved in, what did you participate in high school, or the things that Stanzi thought about as a teenager. We'd love to hear it.
So my teenage years were very consumed with my sport. So I was already at 13, 14 years old, I was competing at a national level in swimming, primarily in the sprint freestyle events. I was already participating on junior national teams, sweeping junior national level events, as you kind of mentioned or alluded to earlier. And that was a big majority of my high school experience. Other than that, I was homeschooled. So I lived a very focused and dedicated life on those two things. Like, how am I going to set myself up to be the best swimmer I can be? How can I prepare myself academically to get into the school that I want? Because if you get into the right school or college someday, then that's going to even further my swimming career. So everything was kind of focused on how can I get to the Olympics and how can I succeed both academically and athletically at a collegiate level. So I took a very tailored, planned approach towards my high school years, and probably didn't spend a lot of my time as most people would choose to do. One of my mentors actually asked me the other day, they were like, do you feel like all the sacrifices you made during high school, from eating as well as you did and spending 40 hours a week at the pool and going to bed early, not going to many parties or doing any sleepovers or anything like that, do you feel like that was worth it? And I responded, I don't feel like those were sacrifices. I feel like they were choices. And we all have the ability to make those choices during those high school and college years. And really, they shouldn't be viewed as sacrifices if you're pursuing something that you're really passionate about. They should be viewed as choices that lead you that much closer to the goals that you want to accomplish.
Well, that's really inspiring, really inspiring. And you touched a little bit about this, but we would love to hear, and I know our listeners would love to hear this too, is just thinking a little bit about the beginning and sharing some of the highlights of your time as a competitive swimmer. So thinking specifically about what age did you first dive into the pool and began swimming? What were some of your most memorable achievements during your tenure at the University of Tennessee as a Lady Vol? We'd love to hear about some of these moments and what stood out to you in the pool as a part of your journey and success.
Yeah, so I started swimming at the age of 4. My dad was reminding me fondly the other day of how my swimming journey actually started as we were writing up a blog post for Elevate. And he was like, we just remember you were playing at this park and you saw some people swimming for like a summer recreation league. And you pointed at the pool and the people that were swimming and you said, I want to do that. And that was really the beginning of a 20 plus year journey full of a lot of emotions, a lot of trial and error, but a tremendous amount of learning and growth that ultimately led me to the University of Tennessee. And during my time there, I was a 15-time Division I All-American. I was an NCAA Woman of the Year nominee, 3-time Academic All-American. I was nominated for 2 different Chancellor's Awards. I also completed over 200 hours of research on student-athlete leadership, which was really fascinating, and ultimately left there having achieved over 200 hours of community service. So I had a very holistic and accomplished collegiate experience, and I think that contributed a lot, not only to the person I became, but also the choices I made in regards to how I managed my mental health. And I really prioritize in all of my coaching now, and even when I talk to young people, like creating that holistic experience is so important when you choose a college. And it led to the tremendous amount of success that I did find at the University of Tennessee.
Wow. I feel like every time you talk, I'm just like blown away by the things that you're saying and how awesome your career has been and is currently. I'd love to think about, and I can only imagine you going through all of this, the impacts like all of this might have had on your mental health and well-being, and would love to kind of transition us a little bit to talking about youth athlete mental health. So as someone who's navigated the demanding world of collegiate sports and now guides young athletes through the journey, I know you're acutely aware of the myriad of challenges they face and managing academics, demanding practice schedules, meeting expectations of coaches, parents, teachers, really even yourself. Could you share your perspective on how these athletes and athletes like yourself can effectively balance all of these competing demands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right off the bat, something that a lot of people might not know about me personally is that I have struggled with really intense anxiety most of my teenage years and young adulthood. And most of that anxiety has been centered around panic attacks, which you would think, oh, that's really inconvenient for an athlete to have panic attacks because, I mean, we're put in very high performance, high achieving situations all the time. But to be diagnosed with a panic disorder, that just adds that much pressure to the situation, and it adds that much more preparation to the situation, because not only am I managing stuff that other athletes have to manage as far as like making sure I'm sleeping right, making sure I'm eating right, doing the weights and that kind of preparation, but I also had to spend a tremendous amount of time preparing myself mentally to be in high pressure situations, because as we know, when that pressure starts mounting, that's when we're at our most vulnerable and we're most susceptible to those panic attacks. And so I had to spend a lot of time learning how to breathe properly from my diaphragm and not just keep my breath centered in my lungs, and how to control that anxiety so it wouldn't explode at like really inappropriate times, like when I was behind the blocks. And so I spent a lot of time researching anxiety, going to therapy, spending a lot of time on what it looks like to train mentally just as much as I did the physical aspects. And I learned a lot from that process as far as like diving into rituals, like listening to music behind the blocks that was calming. You know, a lot of athletes, they would pick music that would get you really amped up, fired up behind the blocks because they needed that much more tension. I didn't need that much more tension. I needed to be brought down because I was already so fired up and susceptible to high energy situations. And I would add a lot of mindfulness. I loved Headspace, the app, when I was younger. That became a part of my meet ritual before I would put my competition suit on. And I really enjoyed investing time into that area of my athletic career just as much as anything else. And I think today it makes me a better person, and it allows me to empathize with student athletes that may struggle with mental health disorders.
I really love what you just shared about your own kind of journey and the struggles you've had with panic disorder. You know, as a psychiatrist, I get to hear so many stories and hold on to many stories. And I sometimes wish that there was a way for people to understand that they're not alone in that. And I commend you on being able to do that and share that on this platform. And as much as you're comfortable, I would love if you would feel comfortable talking a little bit specifically about what panic disorder is, what it looks like, just in case any of our listeners might not know or understand what it is.
So for me, my panic disorder was mostly centralized around nighttime panic attacks. So basically I would have these, especially after like stressful or exhausting days being an athlete, I would have these elevated senses of anxiety that would escalate into a panic attack, and my heart rate would race. I would start shaking, having trembling in my hands and in my muscles. And then at a point when it was really bad during my junior year, I even started, when I was trying to go to sleep, having some hallucinations, some extrasensory perceptions, which is normal for people with panic attacks. And it would prevent me from going to sleep for hours on end, which obviously isn't ideal when you have to get up at 5 a.m. to go to morning practice. Spending your whole night panicking and using all that energy was not great. And so I had to learn very early on how to manage those. And I learned techniques like box breathing, which is when you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, you hold for 4. And those kind of rituals and learning how to do those things helped me to calm those things down, along with the therapy and all of those other things. But panic attacks can be as simple as just like having elevated breathing, or it can be as extreme as having those extra sensory perceptions. It definitely takes a wide range. And, over the last 5 years, I've learned a lot about them, and I have been able to come to a point where I very rarely, if ever, have them, which is super exciting. And I think that just speaks to the level of comfort that I have with myself and with my mental health challenges. But I think I've learned so much from just experiencing those things, and I hold a lot of regard and esteem for those athletes that may be struggling with mental health, because it adds a whole nother level of challenge to the situation.
I think beautifully stated. And I already know that there's going to be listeners who feel so seen and heard by what you just shared and encouraged to seek support. I know you spoke to the benefits of therapy and seeking support. And I'm sure your coaches and your family are also very supportive of that. And you've had an amazing career. So again, thanks for sharing that. Kind of along those lines, again, thinking about your own background in competitive athletics and your involvement currently with the Cal Baptist Athletic Mental Health Committee, you have a unique insight into young athletes' pressures, the pressures that they experience playing their sport, both from your lived experience and just from the conversations you've had with several hundreds of, if not thousands of athletes, balancing the drive to excel in the sport with the importance of maintaining their physical and mental health alongside academic commitment is not a small feat. Based on your experiences, what guidance would you offer to young athletes to navigate these challenges successfully? How can they keep their competitive edge sharp while ensuring that their overall well-being and academic duties are not neglected?
Yeah, I think that one of the first things that comes to mind off the bat is I think there's a huge misconception, even still, and I think it's a lot better these days than it's ever been, especially with the NCAA really pushing for student athlete wellness and student athlete mental health initiatives just across the board. The way they're doing things has been a lot better than it's ever been. However, I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we have and that needs to kind of be rectified is the fact that we're still not encouraging student athletes to go to therapy, even if there isn't a problem. And I think that one of the things that you can do off the bat is, even if you don't feel like you need it, go to therapy, because you're dealing with a tremendous amount of stress that most people aren't going to experience to that level, maybe not ever. And so I would say there's nothing wrong with scheduling a therapy appointment, even if it's just once a month. Just check in with somebody, see where your stress levels are at. That kind of helps you to manage the problem before it becomes a problem. And I do recommend to people, like, even if you don't feel like you need it, it never hurts to go and spend an hour with a therapist, just kind of talking about yourself, talking about the things you're going through, whether that's relationship challenges, academic problems, whatever that looks like for you. We all have stuff that we're going through. Those things, as small as they may seem to you, they're not going to seem small to a therapist. Like, that therapist is going to be willing to talk to you in a way that's non-judgmental, non-confrontational, help you, guide you through different thought processes regarding that problem. It's a very comforting and safe environment, and you're not going to experience that anywhere else. And so that was one of the things that I had a big misconception about when I started therapy, is I thought like I was only there because I had a problem. And the reality is it's another tool in your toolbox. Use it like that, even if you don't feel like you need it. And there's nothing wrong with that. The judgment around therapy has become a lot less than it used to be. But, you know, in the student athlete world, it's very common for people to feel like therapy is unnecessary because student athletes are expected to be tough and like Superman and have no problems. That's not the case. You're still human. You still have problems. You still need help. And so take advantage of those resources if you have access to them. A lot of schools are offering free therapy to student athletes these days. So especially when you're in college, that's a great opportunity to take advantage of that.
I love that. And I love this idea about therapy. And it's not even an idea, it's a fact that therapy is not about when things are wrong. It can be about that, but it's certainly about just supporting you through life, through the difficulties that you experience. And I think, again, you talk about stigma and how stigma has been reduced, but particularly for athletes, there's so much kind of ego. And like you said, feeling like you need to be a super person all the time and you can't have that weakness. And being able to deconstruct that and let people know that, hey, it's okay to go to therapy. You're doing something that most people don't do. Your college experience is very different than most people's college experience, and you should be able to talk about that. And I think that's a really beautiful way to help support young people, particularly young athletes, as they navigate sports and balancing academics and relationships and friends and everything that kind of comes with being a student athlete. So again, beautiful answer. Our next part, we'll be talking a little bit about transitioning from high school to collegiate sports. And in your role as Elevate Athletic Consulting, you have the unique opportunity to mentor young athletes aspiring to compete at the collegiate level and possibly the Olympic level. While incredibly rewarding, this journey comes with its own personal pressures and challenges. From your extensive experience, what should these athletes in high school understand about the realities of competing at such elite levels? How can they best prepare for the pressures they'll face? And what are some common pitfalls you've observed that young athletes should be aware of?
When I talk about Elevate, I always start smiling because this is, for me, Elevate is the pinnacle of my story and everything that I've gone through as a person, as an athlete, educationally. My story has led me to Elevate. And I started dreaming about Elevate in graduate school and started putting together some thoughts about it, started brainstorming it. And I was struggling with some imposter syndrome, honestly, because it seemed like something that I was so excited about. And it was such a big dream that I found myself hesitating at first to kind of put it into action. And then back in October, I finally decided to jump off the cliff and get it started. And honestly, I've been thrilled with the response we've received so far, the excitement that I received from the student athlete committee or community, and people that I've known for years and my network have just been beyond supportive. And I think that's a big part of it, first of all. But also, kind of to further expand on your question, some of the common pitfalls and the reason why I started Elevate to begin with was because I saw this increasing need for support amidst how challenging NCAA recruiting and that whole dynamic can be for both parents and student athletes. And the mental health challenge and connotation with it even is complicated. Ever since COVID, there has been a massive turnover of student athletes in the transfer portal. People are transferring like crazy these days. And it's not for often the reasons that you might think. A lot of people think that people just transfer because of the athletic reasons, right? There's nothing to do with all the other dynamics of your collegiate experience. But we get so locked in and focused on the athlete side of things, and we're losing perspective on the whole picture. And Elevate was really designed with the mindset of your college experience is so much more than just the athlete side of things. And so how can I, being that I've been through a college experience and I've seen the challenges and made a lot of errors and wish I had done things better in certain ways and grown a lot in others, how can I help you, come alongside you and support you through choosing that college that best matches the whole picture, the academics? Maybe religion is a big part of it for you. Maybe you need good mental health support and resources. Maybe there's a specific academic program. Maybe balance is what you crave. If you're going into a hard major like pre-med, maybe you need a lighter academic program to support the two, because it's really hard, as I learned, to do pre-med and be a Division I athlete at the same time. And I ended up switching to psychology because I couldn't handle the demands of being pre-med and being a Division I athlete. If I really wanted to be pre-med, probably should have picked a lighter swimming schedule. And maybe for some, it might be that you just want to be close to home. Maybe that's the priority. But we don't give a lot of thought to all of those different aspects. We're very much focused on what is the program that's going to make me the best athlete, and not the program that's going to make me the best person or be the best fit for me academically. And so Elevate kind of steps in and allows for these guided conversations where we look at the bigger picture, the values, the goals, all of the student athlete personality. Are they introverted, extroverted? Those are all things that should be considered in the recruiting process. And we're failing our student athletes right now in helping them kind of develop that holistic picture. And so that's where those recruiting guidance sessions really come into play, is helping have those conversations around those things. But kind of further than that, the NCAA is always changing. Legislation is changing. I've seen that in compliance. Like, there is always something new. And I don't think parents or student athletes are really aware of how much those changes in the NCAA impact them at an individual level. Like, there's been tons of scholarship changes this year. And it used to be in the past, most scholarships were single-year deals. But now it's more common to offer a multi-year scholarship because of different legislative changes. And so when they come to me at Elevate, like, I'm able to help them kind of navigate those legislative changes, those bigger picture changes that the NCAA has been instilling, and help them use them to their advantage so they can get those better scholarship deals. They can be recruited more effectively. Those are all things that I kind of have learned during my experience that now I get to share and help others kind of benefit from them. So long-winded answer, but there's a lot of different pitfalls and things that you can encounter during the recruiting process. And Elevate is kind of a supporting structure for helping you navigate those.
Yeah, I think even your point about the transfer portal, I think so many college sports fans might get really frustrated when their favorite college athlete or someone from their team leaves and they think it's about drama, but there's so much more to that. And these students are human beings first, and there's reasons why they make those changes. And it sounds like the work you're doing at Elevate is super awesome in that it supports the person that is also happen to play a sport through their navigation and transitioning into college and into college sports. So I think that's really beautiful. And I think it segues nicely into what I want to talk about next, in supporting student athletes. And again, I wonder, maybe from your own personal experience or even advice that you've given to other student athletes, how can student athletes effectively communicate their mental health needs to their coaches, to their teams, especially in environments where stigma might be really high when they want to seek help?
Yeah, I think that's one of the scariest and most challenging conversations that a student athlete can have with a coach, right? Because when you have those conversations, you're putting your heart out on the line. You're having to enter a stage of vulnerability to even have those conversations. And I think expressing that's something that's important to you from the get-go and not stuffing it down and pretending like it doesn't exist is super important. When I was being recruited the second time around, because I was at University of Southern California first, and then I transferred to the University of Tennessee, mostly because I had some priority shifts after my freshman year, and again, was looking for a bigger, better holistic picture. That was one of the things that I would really prioritize in my second recruiting experience, was what are the resources from a mental health perspective. And I was really excited when they told me that they had a sports psychologist on staff at the University of Tennessee, because that allowed me to meet with him on a weekly basis. And those things are recruiting advantages these days, but kind of identifying that is something that is important to you and then being vocal about it, it's going to do nothing but help you because then you're allowing the coach to kind of dive into, okay, what are the resources we offer here and how can we best support this person? The worst thing that you can do from my perspective is to not be vocal about those things. But again, from a student athlete perspective, those things are difficult, and being vulnerable about those things, it's a tremendous step of growth and one that's not easy. So do it at a time that makes sense, in a way that makes sense to you. Obviously, don't force it just to force it. But if it's something that is a priority to you, I would encourage you to be vocal about it.
I know that our listeners are going to be very empowered and inspired, particularly our student athletes. And this idea about recruiting and going on a campus visit and then learning that there's a sports psychologist or mental health professional, that sounds really awesome. I used to recruit for the University of Florida, and that never came up. And I think that's so cool that it comes up a lot more now. And hopefully other schools are following suit in doing that, because it's so important and needed, especially right now. And kind of lastly, thinking about your extensive background, both as a competitive athlete and a professional guiding young athletes, you understand the unique pressures and challenges of balancing a sport, academics, and personal well-being. Given this, I'm wondering, what message would you like to share to student athletes who might be struggling, feeling isolated, or overwhelmed by the pressure of competition? What encouragement or advice can you offer them to help navigate these challenges and remind them of their strength and resilience?
First of all, you're never alone. There are so many people going through so many things these days. And I think it's become more and more evident over the last couple of years since COVID. People are starting to reckon with their mental health a little more, partially because of the shift in culture, but also because it's become a necessity, especially for a lot of student athletes where people are separated by so little competitively these days. There's such an inflation of people that are now participating in competitive athletics. Those little things, like taking care of your mental health, sleeping, eating, they add up, and they are all going to come together to help you be a better competitor. But it starts with understanding that you're not alone, and there are people who are out there to support you and help you along your journey, whether that's your parents, your siblings, maybe it's that therapist, maybe it's somebody at school, maybe it's your friends. Rely on those people. Choosing to go head to head with your mental health is one of the hardest decisions that I've had to make, but it is a decision, and you do have to at some point agree to face it head on and dive into the therapy or dive into the resources or extend your hand out to that support system. And those are the things that are going to separate you competitively from the person in the next lane or the person on the field next to you, or those are the things that are going to get you that much closer to where you want to be. And when it comes to picking your school or diving into athletics, don't let those things hinder you from finding success at your next school. As you progress through athletics, there's more and more resources, and there's going to be more and more help, and it's more and more accepted to ask for those things. And I would say, even if you pick a school and it's not quite the right fit at the beginning, you're never stuck there. There's always opportunity to leave and go somewhere else, and like I did. And there's a lot more flexibility there than you think. So really rely on the fact that you get to choose your journey. This is your story, and use your story to market yourself those coaches. And if eventually it doesn't work out the way you had quite expected, there's always opportunity to go somewhere else and add another kind of chapter to that story that you're in.
Stanzi McGowan, you are a world-class athlete, a decorated champion, several medals. You don't need me to tell you that, but thank you so much for this world-class interview. Thank you for being a mental health champion and an advocate for student well-being and student athlete well-being in general. You shared so many valuable insights with us for advocating for youth today. It was a pleasure to listen and learn from you. I think we were able to put our differences aside, me being a Florida Gator and you being a Tennessee Volunteer, and we were able to come together in SEC solidarity, so that's great. Until next time, this is Dr. Alonge, along with our producer, Derek, reminding you to keep being you. Peace.